Today, we are going to see about the tools and areas of assessment. Let me define what do we mean by assessment. It is a multifaceted process of gathering information. Appropriate tools and techniques have to be used for assessment, and this assessment is done in order to diagnose and take an educational decision about placements and educational program. Previously, only one test was done in order to find out the presence of disability, but now a comprehensive approach is used. It includes current life circumstances, home environment, school, health, nutritional status, family attitude and values. Developmental history. It is the developmental milestone of the child where there is a delay in developmental milestone. It shows deviation. Outside factor, where it is more oriented of teachers with parents. The next one is interpretation of behavior and the performance based on the clinical experience and judgment of the evaluator. Progress or future performance or prediction based on two alternatives, whether the child can continue to live in the same environment or the child to be placed in a remedial environment. The first one is identification and screening. Tests are administered to students to identify how the students are different from their age mates. After identification, we have to classify and place the child. With the above test, we classify and these identified students are placed in special school. Based on the placement, we need to plan the program. It helps the teacher to plan the program, that is what, when and how to teach for the special child. Then people individual evaluation. Here individually you have to evaluate and see whether the child is doing well or not and shows the progress or not. And the next one is program evaluation. Evaluate the progress of all children or the entire program. The tools for assessment of the children with autism can be classified as screening tools for autism, diagnostic tools for autism, functional assessment checklist for socio-communication and methods of assessment. Early signs of autism in babies and toddlers. The children with autism will not make eye contact, smile when smiled at, will not respond to his or her name or to the sound of a familiar voice. They will not follow objects visually, point or wave goodbye or use other gestures to communicate. They will not follow the gesture when you point things out. They will not make noises to get your attention, irritate or respond to cuddling, imitate your movements and facial expression. They will not reach out to the picked up, play with other people or share interests and enjoyment. They will not be able to ask for help or make other basic requirements. The possible specific symptoms for 1 to 4-year-old with autism includes they prefer to be alone, not come for comfort when ill, hurt or tired, avoid people gaze, lack an awareness of other people's existence, delayed language development, poor language comprehension, inappropriate gestures. They will have unusual first word, repeats the words, unusual manner of talking, have unusual body movements, shows attachments to unusual objects, have extreme fear, difficulty in toilet training, persistently occupied with thoughts or objects. They will show marked stress over changes in their environment. As children get older, the red flags for autism become more diverse. There are many warning signs and symptoms, but a typical revolve around impaired social skills, speech and language difficulties, nonverbal communication difficulties and inflexible behavior. Basic social interaction can be difficult for children with autism spectrum disorders. Many kinds on the autism spectrum disorder seems to prefer to live in their own world, aloof and detached from others, appears disinterested or unaware of other people or what's going on around them, does not know how to connect with others, play or make friends, prefers not to be touched, held or cuddled, doesn't play pretend games, engage in group games, imitate others or use toys in creative ways, has trouble understanding or talking about feelings, does not see to hear when others talk to him or her, do not share interests or achievements with others. Children with autism spectrum disorders have difficulty with speech and language. Often they start talking late, speaks in an abnormal tone of voice or in an odd rhythm or pitch. For example, ends every sentence as if asking question. Repeat the same word or phrases over and over. Responds to a question by repeating it rather than answering it. Refer to himself or herself in the third person, use languages incorrectly, has difficulty in communicating needs or desires, does not understand simple direction, statements or questions, takes what it said to literally. Children with autism spectrum disorder have trouble in picking on subtle non-verbal cues and using body language. This makes the give and take of social interaction very difficult. They will avoid eye contact, uses a facial expression that does not match what he or she is saying, do not pick up on other people's facial expression, tone of voice and gestures, make very few gestures such as pointing, may come across as cold or robot-like, reacts unusually to sight, smell, texture and sound, may be especially sensitive to loud noise, abnormal posture, clumsiness or eccentric ways of moving. Children with autism spectrum disorder are often restricted, inflexible and even obsessive in their own behavior, activities and interests, follows a rigid routine. For example, insists on taking a specific route to school, has difficulty adapting to any changes in schedule or environment, usually attachments to toys or strange objects such as keys, light, switches or rubber bands, obsessively lines things up or arrange them in a certain order, preoccupation with a narrow topic of interest often involving numbers or symbols, spends longer period of time arranging toys in a specific ways, watching moving objects such as a ceiling fan or focusing on one specific part of an object such as wheel of the toy or car, repeats the same action or movements repeatedly such as flapping hands, rocking or twirling. Some researchers and clinicians believe that these behaviors may soothe children with autism more than stimulate them. There are two tools for assessing children with autism. They are Indian Scale for Assessment of Autism and Childhood Autism Rating Scale. The Indian Scale for Assessment of Autism is developed by the National Institute for Mentally Handicapped for diagnosing and measuring the severity of the autism in the year 2009. It consists of 40 items under 6 domains. The first domain is social relationship and reciprocity. The second one is emotional responsiveness. The third one is speech, language and communication. The fourth one is behavior pattern. The fifth one is sensory aspects, and the sixth one is cognitive components. The items should be tested by observing the child or by interviewing the parent in order to assess autism. Assessment of person with autism may take 20 to 30 minutes. Assessment must be done with appropriate materials and activities to elicit response from the individual with autism. The assessment kit should be comprised of the materials such as car, pictures, book, bottle, mirror, key and blocks. The Indian scale for assessment of autism should be scored as per the directions that is given in the manual. Each of the 40 test items is to be rated on the 5 categories, out of which one is to be checked. These are further qualified by providing percentages to indicate the frequency, degree and intensity of behavioral characteristics that are observed. The categories along with the percentage includes rarely. If the child performs the activity very rarely, it indicates that the person exhibits this behavior pattern for up to 20% of the time. This score is normal for their age and socio-educational background. Then a score 1 will be given. If the behavior or the action exhibits sometimes indicates that the person exhibits this behavior pattern for up to 21 to 40% of the time. Some of this behavior may be a cause for attention and concentration, but largely they may be considered within the normal limits for their age and social educational background. Then a score 2 will be given. If the child exhibits the behavior frequently, it indicates the person exhibits this behavior pattern for up to 41 to 60% of the times. This behavior occurs with such frequency and regularity that they interfere with the person's functioning in daily life. Behavior at this level will be definitely disabling. The person may be able to perform activities of daily life with the minimum assistance, then the score 3 will be given. If the child performs the behavior mostly, indicates the person exhibits this behavior pattern for up to 61 to 80% of the time. The given behavior may occur without any discernible stimulus. The behavior under consideration occurs so regularly that it significantly hampers the person in performing daily activities. The person needs assistance in activities in daily life, then a score 4 will be given. If the child performs the activities always, it indicates the person exhibits the behavior pattern for up to 81 to 100% of the times, so that it would be considered a major handicap. The behavior shown is seldom appropriate to the given situation. The person is completely dependent on activities of daily life, then a score 5 will be given. The minimum score that can be obtained is 40. The maximum score that can be obtained is 200. If the score is less than 70, then the child is not having autism. If the child's score is between 70 to 106, then the child will be classified as mild autism. If the score lies between 107 to 153, then the child will be labeled as moderately autism. More than 153, then the child will be classified as severely autistic child. The Childhood Autism Rating Scale is the diagnostic assessment method that rates the children on a scale from 1 to 4 of various criteria, ranking from normal to severe, ranking from non-autistic to mildly autistic, moderately severe or severely autistic. This scale is used to observe and subjectively rate 15 items. It includes relationship to the people, imitation, emotional response, body, object use, adaptation to change, visual response, listening to response, taste, smell, touch, response and use, fear and nervousness, verbal communication, non-verbal communication, activity level, level and consistency of intellectual response, general response. The scale is based on the subjective observation of the child's behavior. The score grade below rate each of the 15 criteria. For each category, the rate the item relevant to each item of the scale. For each item, circle the number which corresponds to the statement that best describes the child. If the child is between two descriptions, the rating of 1.5, 2.5, 3.5 must be given. The total scores ranges from 15 to 60. If the score is between 15 to 30, then the child will be classified as non-autistic. If it is between 30 to 36, then the child is mildly autistic. If it ranges from 36 to 60, then the child will be classified as severely autistic. The functional assessment is mainly assessing the socio-communication skills. There are 23 areas in which it is assessed by the response of yes or no. Functional assessment checklist for socio-communication skills. We have to see whether the child gives eye contact or stares very intently, gives blank stares or shows inappropriate amount of distress or laughter, shows non-verbal enhancement such as nodding, pointing or struggling her shoulders, interested in having friends, knows how to make friends, talks with his or her back towards people, uses words to refer to object or people. See whether the child shows deviant language, pronoun reversals, echolalia, child engages in pretend play or insist on. See whether the child plays the same play every time. Child imitates another one's action. Example, reading newspaper like the father, making food in pots and pans like mother. See whether the child learns vast amount of information about highly restricted topic such as geography and memorizing facts, example, maps, calendars, etc. Child focuses on particular toy. See whether the child plays with unusual objects, wheels, straws, strings, sticks, etc. See whether the child shares the focus of attention through gestures. Check whether the child faces trouble in maintaining social interaction, even pleasurable ones with their own dear ones. Check whether the child realizes that their conversant partner is bored, in a hurry or end a social interaction abruptly. See whether the child chooses a topic for the conversation in which the other person is interested. See whether the child always begins by asking the same sentence, example, father's name, date of birth, etc. Check whether the child delivers a monologue. Child prefers to listen the same story before going to bed. See whether the child shows echolalia, immediate or delayed. See whether the child shows pronoun reversals. Check whether the child shows metamorphic speech using a phrase or a metaphor. See whether the child falls in yes or no category. Then based on the response, you plan for the child's individual plan. The methods of assessment includes 8 domains which necessitates the basic observation on communication skills, eating and drinking, dressing and undressing skills, cooking skills, creative dramatics, behavior, dance and music. In observation of communication skills, see what was being communicated by the educator, by the child and by the young adult, and how did the trainee interpret what the child was trying to communicate. How did the child communicate by gestures, by body language, by speaking, by writing or any other, and see whether there is any deviation from the norms that have been established for speaking. Next is observation of eating and drinking. See what are the equipments that had been used and the food type that was used. Thali, plate, table mat, spoon, glass, cup, tumbler, roti, rice, curried items, vegetables and bread. See what are the social skills the child exhibits during eating. Cleaning, laying the table mat, eating and drinking without spilling, serving self others, pouring water, washing plate, utensils, sharing by asking anything, eating in a socially appropriate manner. While observing the dressing and undressing skills, see what are the skills that have been taught. Whether the child is able to remove the clothes, wearing clothes, stacking clothes, folding clothes, knowing inside and outside, grooming skills, age and socially appropriate dressing skills. Example, spraying perfume, wearing the tie, putting on lipstick, etc. In observing cooking skills, see whether the child sit in the kitchen, spreading butter jam, cutting, chopping, dicing, grinding, peeling, washing utensils, mixing, mashing, preparing a dish, switching the gas on off, even oven cooking, gas cooking, etc. While doing cooking, see whether the child uses both the receptive as well as the expressive communication. While observing the creative dramatics, see how body language, gestures, sound, speech, touch, musical instruments and language that have been used by the person with autism. See the skills that have been used by the person with autism, that is movements intended to learn, behavior, mannerism and social skills. In observation of the behavior, see whether the child smiles, smells, jump, spinning, jumping, running, screaming, touching, laughing, crying, rock self, banging blocks, mouthing objects, putting objects in ear, licking, tasting and objects. While observing the dance movements, see whether the child performs isolated movements, alternate movements, following of rhythm, imitation, creativity, alternate weight bearing, toe strike, heel strike, finger movements and other exceptional skills. While the intervention was observed, see whether the body concepts have been learned by the child, whether the child exhibits the social skills, whether the child waits for the turn taking, child communication is appropriate or the child manages the behavior. In music performance, see whether the child prefers the types of sounds of drum, bell, gangru, etc. Preferred volume, preferred song, type of music and the posture in which the music lasts. See the behavior that have been seen while the child engages in music. Shuts ears on hearing particular sounds, goes near the source of sound, giving of rhythmic tapping, movement of specific body parts in synchrony with music, is positively excited, is distressed in a musical atmosphere. Assessment is an important aspect in planning need-based curriculum for rehabilitating person with autism.